I'm going to hand it over to Mike.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to give that back. Okay, there you go. There you go. All right. Okay, well, thank you, folks, for sticking around for our final session that will wrap up the conference for today. Welcome to the CISO Industry Leader Panel, Securing the Future. The CISO Insights and Industry Leaders discussing current cyber threats and strategic defense practices. So, my name is Michael Landy. I'll be moderating the session this afternoon. A little bit about me. As Andrew has said, I'm a Senior Vice President of Risk Governance, Information Technology, and Cybersecurity for Citibank. I've been with them for about 5 years. I've been in technology and security for about 25 years in various roles. So I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists today, starting with Samantha, and each person will introduce themselves and give us a little background. So.
Hello, there we go. Perfect. Hi everyone, my name is Samantha Leanillo. I'm the Senior Vice President, Information Security for TCM Bank. We're a mid-sized credit card company.
Hello everybody, my name is Stephany Setrajcic. I'm the Chief Audit Executive at Pathward, and similar to TCM, we also deal with prepaid products.
And once again, I'm Bevans, VP of Technology and Data Protection Officer for BenefitHub.
All right, well, thank you. So our format will be, we'll start out with some questions that we've compiled for the panelists in advance, and then we're going to leave some time at the end for questions from the audience. If you do have a particular question on the topic that we're covering during the question set, can you please raise your hand, and we'll try to accommodate as many questions as we can. But we do have a lot of questions already preset, so we'll just go ahead and get started with that. And the first topic we're going to talk about is emerging threats. And so to the panel, what are the most significant emerging cybersecurity threats, and how should organizations prepare for them? So, anybody want to start us off?
So I will get us started. I'll take a different approach to it. So everyone says AI, but I am most concerned about AI from the user perspective. So from an internal threat perspective, making sure our users understand the risks associated with AI and are using them responsibly is something that's an emerging threat that we're particularly keen to try to address.
I would say the one other thing, the emerging threat is that vague thing that comes tomorrow. It's the security person not being aware of what's out there, to be in touch, to have that network of, hey, I just heard about this, because constantly things are emerging, and AI is just the latest of them that we've been talking about. But it's just that constant awareness that could be the potential threat, is just not knowing it's out there at all, and so having the community of other security people together to be able to talk about it is just one of the biggest ways of actually combating those threats out there.
Okay. And any questions from the audience out there on emerging threats or AI? How about IoT vulnerabilities for emerging threats?
I'm going to let you take that one since we talked about it. So have at it.
Well, yeah, I guess the proliferation of Internet of Things devices presents a whole new attack vectors, right? And as many devices as they lack robust security features. Often they're connected to the organization's networks and the back ends. They come without security considerations a lot of times. So I think that's an emerging threat. It's been around for a while, but I think folks are trying to get their arms around that. So I think that's one. We have a couple others. Ransomware as a service is kind of spawned up. We see a little bit of that. Any other areas that you guys? No? Yeah, supply chain attacks. I think that's common. Oh, yes, we got a question. Insider threat. Somebody want to take that?
Yeah, so I think insider threat is a really big deal. I just kind of touched on it from an AI perspective. That's just one example. But we have a lot of struggles in the sense that there is a litany of different attack vectors, and I think the struggle that needs to be talked about is making sure you have the minimum foundation to a security practice that kind of encompasses all components that meet the need for securing the most critical assets, and then tailor per user according to that. So role-based access control, I'll say it again and again and again, is really at the very heart of making sure you have appropriateness for access types, and you can tailor in monitoring and compensating controls to kind of manage that. Another thing too on the insider threat side is a lot of the tooling that we have is very disparate depending on the types of systems and access types, and that is increased by the need for using things like cloud services and web applications. Like that's kind of just expanded. So absolutely, it's one of those things that's a really big deal that we all should be having a conversation about.
Yeah, and I'd say with the insider threat, it's not necessarily an emerging threat, it's an existing threat. Having insiders is going to always be a threat. It's that human error factor, whether intentional or unintentional. Yeah, okay, percentage has gone up. I would agree with that. The work pool has also gone up as well, so they're kind of hand in hand. The kind of what they were talking about earlier today about, why don't I just go to ransomware instead of going to college because I can make more money? The insiders are realizing that maybe that's the way to go, that I could cash out by doing this. And I mean, it goes down to our three, CIA. If you don't have that integrity, you can do just about anything. And so having those RBAC in place, having other, it's the onion layer approach. It's just having multiple layers, limit them to only the access they need access to, and vetting the ones that need access to the highest data. And it's not, kind of like what I said with policies earlier, it's not a one and done. It's a continuous, because things change all the time. Maybe we looked at them 5 years ago and everything was going great, but now they could be going through a messy divorce or bankruptcy or something else and need the cash. And so it's persistent with all threats, but as well as with insider threats as well.
And I also think that in those scenarios, audit is your best friend. We talk about continuous monitoring, but if you're just looking at the logs but not taking any action on them, that's a whole other thing. So making sure that the person that's reviewing those monitoring aspects understand deviations from normal roles and what is out of norm for certain behaviors, right, and can take action on it, right? So audit is always our best friend, and I'm adding her into this because she's in a similar field. Being able to have users that are responsible for coming back through and validating, trust but validate, right?
Excuse me, folks, can we keep it down? The panel, we can't hear the panel here, please. These guys, okay, yeah.
Hey guys, outside, can you keep it down, please, so we can hear each other inside here? Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Another area I think that's emerging that's deep fake threats. So when technology is used to create convincing fabricated audio or video, and that poses a risk to organizations through social engineering attacks and reputational damage as well. So raising awareness with employees, ensuring that we have robust authentication measures is critical to make sure that we don't fall for the deep fake threats. The rise of digital surveillance, loss of privacy. So, we think that, with governments and nation states, the increasing use of surveillance technologies to monitor citizens and companies is a concern. So we need to make sure that we're raising these concerns through, with governments and privacy and civil liberties to make sure that we're pushing for those types of controls. So I think I'm going to move on to the next area that we have a question on with regard to incident response. So to the panel, what are the critical elements of an effective incident response plan, and how can organizations ensure swift and coordinated responses to cyber threats?
So I can start. Just a caveat, so what I'm about to share with you is my view, my opinion, not speaking on behalf of my employer. And I do work in internal audit, so my perspective is going to be a little bit different. So in audit, we have a saying, in God we trust, and all else we demand documentation. So when we're looking at an incident response plan, what we really want to see is not only the documentation, but the definitions. So are there defined roles and responsibilities? If you experience an attack, do people know what they are supposed to do? Also, if you've experienced an attack, have you already planned how you're going to communicate with one another? Do you know if your emails are compromised? Can you talk on the phone? Do you have a secure server where you can put your logs, everything that you're finding? How do you know what that attacker has access to? We also look for, how do you escalate? How do you respond to these things? Who do you call? When do you bring in the FBI or the local authorities? So all of those are things that you should be thinking about before the attack happens. If all of this is in place from an audit perspective, we also want to see, did you do any kind of simulation before? Have you done a tabletop? Or is everything you put together theoretical? And have you done training, not just for employees, but how about the people that are going to be responsible for executing this plan? Have they been trained? Has your response team been trained? And then the last thing that we normally see in an audit is there's all this great documentation, but we're always going to ask, when's the last time you updated this? Do you have a periodic process to take a look at it and just change it, right? Make sure it's still up to date with how your company is running and the external threats that you're facing.
And I'll add to that that's all the internal, but something else you have to have in your incident response policy. Who is the person or people in your company that should be talking to the media? Everybody else should not be talking to the media. You should have somebody that's gone to actual training on how to address the media, because if an incident happens, it's going to make the news and they're going to want to know. And if they call up Joe Schmo and he doesn't know he's not supposed to talk to him, and say, you can't believe what happened here, and then it goes out of control. So you have to have it in place for that incident of who is responsible and acceptable for talking to the media, and that everybody else in the company knows that they are not allowed to talk to the media.
If I could just add one extra thing to that, is that your staff, your front line, should absolutely be a part of your incident response plan. They are your first line of defense. They need to understand deviations from normal behaviors and be able to identify potential incidents as quickly as possible, right? To reduce the threat and to reduce the data exposures or other security risks that could come up from that incident. So we try to take an approach of situational specific awareness that's very reflective of your job roles and responsibilities, so that if you notice that something deviates from that path, you can escalate appropriately. So incident response, test it, validate it, but also make sure everyone in the company has an understanding of their responsibility for incident response.
All right, well, thank you, guys. Another question on that. Can you share a successful incident response story or case study that highlights the lessons learned, critical lessons learned?
I can take a first approach, and it's not with my current company, so we'll just say that. Speaking about situational awareness, we had an incident that occurred previously in which someone who is not in any way, shape, or form responsible for incident response or responsible for security notate something that seemed strange and had the thought to validate it with someone else in the company, someone that they sat next to even, just to get a second opinion on whether or not something seemed off. And that launched a full-on investigation in which we noticed that someone had created a shadow administrator account to our payroll department and system and made out with quite a bit of money. So in those instances, someone just stopping and thinking, hey, maybe this doesn't line up with the way that it should be, or I have questions, getting that, having that openness environment to go and ask questions and having the ability to do that was really important for stopping it, because the incident was actually going on for quite a long period of time. So, that's an incident response that we hope to never have to go through again.
Absolutely. Any questions from the audience on this topic? Yes, in the back. You got a...
Okay, so I have a story and then like a question. So I was at a large company over here in Florida, not gonna name any names. We had a hurricane come through, right? So they're waiting until like the very last minute to close things down. It finally comes, and they're like, all right, let's look at these policies. The local policy said, look at national policy. The national policy said, look at local policy. So there's that. I feel a big thing with incident response is so many companies are just like cutting down on humans. They're making you wear more hats and they're maximizing their margins. No one stops to think like, hey, you're doing an extra role. What if we set aside time and money to like not just have you watch some video, but literally train you on this, because no one does. We had some engineers working during a hurricane. We're literally unplugging things and pulling drives, and servers are being pulled so they don't get flooded. And they're just typing on. I was like, hey, you gotta stop typing on this computer. I need to unplug it. And they were just like, what do I do? Like, go home. Like, what do you mean? Like, it's a hurricane. So I feel people aren't trained on the other aspects of their job. And it's asking a lot, well, not say a lot, but it's like, it's cool to have a policy, right? But like, who will you hire? What sort of time and money will you set aside? Just like in school, right? We have all these drills for earthquakes or fires or whatever, right? So it's like, when do we do this stuff? Because when we actually had hurricanes hit, no one knew what to do. No one wanted to leave because we wanted to get paid. And, that's just like a hurricane, right? Not even like cyber. So it's like, if it's a cyber attack, like maybe we should have radios, like you were saying. If we can't talk safely, what about that, right? Like people leave. We're supposed to talk about roles and not people, right? But like if someone leaves, like, do you practice being this go-to or this intermediary person? I don't see it happen, so yeah, I'm just kind of, how do you guys deal with the actual aspect of companies making you do more with less all the time, every year?
Okay, somebody want to take that? I think, one thing with that on that topic is that, scenarios and doing a risk assessment, right? So everything kind of boils down to doing your risk assessments and then identifying what the your higher threats are. We're in Florida here. This year we're going to have probably a number of hurricanes they're forecasting, so it'd probably be a good idea to start prepping for that, and then, and especially for incidents or threats like that. So I don't know what the panel has.
So I know it's going to be a surprise, but I'm fully behind training. It's something that doesn't happen enough at all, without a doubt. I would like to point out that a couple different things were mentioned there. Yes, technically an incident, but you do have a disaster recovery plan. Do you have a business continuity plan in place? Because those would be much more important than an incident response at that point, because you can't blame Mother Nature for the incident, whereas you should have a disaster recovery in place and a business continuity policy in place that states, in the event of a hurricane, which everybody in Florida is going to experience probably this year, within the next 3 years, definitely, what happens during that hurricane? What are the steps? What are the preparations up to that hurricane so that somebody isn't still working on their computer because they should have been sent home 3 days ago, to give the infrastructure and security enough time to do everything that we need to do on the back end to make sure that after that hurricane passes, the business can still do their function. So that has to be baked into not just an incident response, but your business continuity and disaster recovery plan. They just have to be there, have to be accepted at top level, work your way down. The business has to agree to these so that when somebody is still sitting at their desk working and you unplug it, not ask them at that point, you unplug it because that's the state of the policy. All they can do is complain to the people that have already agreed to that policy. They shouldn't be in the building now at that point anyway because of the policy. Here's the policy, go ahead and read it. It should be disseminated to everybody. All executives should have those policies so that they can refer to those policies and get the executives involved. Hey, this guy in marketing isn't leaving. Let me get the chief marketing officer and say, hey, your guys are still around here and we may not be able to come back up because they're not leaving. And I guarantee you, they're gonna get a call within minutes and we'll be out the door 30 seconds later. So use that bridge that you've made with the executives, that don't use it like Chicken Little, but when you need it, that's what that bridge is there for, is that the business can help you do the job that they want you to do.
So I would add, I think all of us have experienced being asked to do more with less people. So agnostic to incident response, I found something that can be very effective is saying, here's the trade-off, right? If you want an SLA of 4 hours, but I don't have enough people to hit that, then we need to readjust expectations. The SLA is now 12 hours. So I think that can also be a very powerful tool to just bring forth options, and this is the trade-off that you're gonna have.
Or just one final thing on that, exactly that the trade-off is, we have the next 8 hours lined up, and now we're told we have to do this. You go back to them and say, okay, these are the other 3 things that I'm working on. I have to put these aside. Do you approve that? And now you're not just saying, I'm gonna do what you want me to, but you're getting their approval not to do what you're already supposed to, because you're working for the business. That's a business decision if they want you to go in a different direction, but you're still one person. So I only have 24 hours in a day and you want me to do 36 hours worth of work. It physically cannot be done. So which 12 hours do you not want me to do? And I need that in writing, please.
Right. Great points. Yes.
Hi, Steve Ross with Citi. I've been doing cyber response exercises for the last 7.5 years. We did an event with the City of New York in conjunction with West Point and a bunch of other. We had 20 people from emergency management, police, fire, everybody and brother, utilities, transportation. Multi-day exercise we did. But a couple of things I noticed when we did this event is we get calls later on. One of the things was, well, their 911 system has a backup. It rolls over to their 411 system. And well, this is how we do this, because part of the scenario we had was their 911 system went down. And they went back, we got a call a week later. We went back and asked the question, has anybody ever checked it? The pipe between the 911 system and the 411 system would only handle a couple of calls, not the hundreds of calls. So they had a system in place, they had a connection, but nobody had ever tested it. And the other part of it that was really significant is they had an actual incident a week later, and we had a call from another person that said, hey, we just had this incident. I would not have known who to call to find out this information had we not done that incident. And I think that's when you know, how, I've seen it and I know how successful it is, but until you get the executives in the room and you run them through an event where they actually have to answer, you know, it's great to say theoretical, but when you run a real event, well, not a real event, but you run a simulated event through and they actually have to answer the questions. Okay, here, the press has just asked you this question. You've got 50 minutes to answer it, or they're going to come up with their own story. How do you do that? Oh, well, don't know. HR person, come on, you know, ask those questions. And the first time it will be a mess. I've done it for years. The first time they do it, by the time you get the second or third time, they're on it. They know because they've gone through it. They've realized the mistakes. But how do you get that first step in getting them to get in the room the first time? Once you get them in the room the first time, it's easy to get them back because they're like, we need to, as soon as you're done with the first one, we want to do this again. But getting them in the room the first time, there was a lot of, well, I'm pulling my entire staff for half a day or a day out. That's a lot of, you know, a bunch of managing directors and directors in a room. That's really expensive to do. I don't have time for that. We've got customers, we've got people. How do you convince them of the advantage of doing that training specifically for that incident response? Because you don't want to do it in the incident.
So my previous position, we had that exact issue, and the way it was solved was my CEO said, you will be there. Why? Because I got the CEO to buy in on that it was a good idea. It all goes back to the top down. So if you're getting executives together, get the biggest executive that's supposed to be there to back you. And that could be a long conversation. I'm thankful it was a very quick conversation because he was technology oriented. So he could see it very quickly why it was a good example. So that something like that when an incident happens, it's not just security that has to take care of that incident. It's a team that should have every executive as part of that team. And the only way you know if it works or not is that team gets together to do that simulation. And what was great was they let me decide what the simulation was. And when I said what it was, the CEO actually went, because it's the worst possible scenario. But if you can handle that, everything else is easy. So you can't just say, oh, well, there's a hurricane. Hurricane happens every year, so we shut the place down and we're done. Well, great. That's a disaster that we're going to deal with. But what happens when an internal malicious user takes all 3 million records that you have that have credit card data in it and walks out the door with a drive that has it because we have nothing in place? And that's what gets everybody to cringe and realize that, yeah, it may be a half a day that we're all wasting, but one incident like that, and we're all out of a job. So it's putting them in the right mindset, and you have to do it from the top down.
And we were all talking about this earlier offline. You know, when you're questioned about the cost of something, you have to be able to show the value of it. You know, what is the fines or the fees or the outage or the downtime that you are avoiding by investing this time? And I would also say, you know, compliance, security, risk, this is not just one department's job, it's a team sport. And you want to have those relationships with your executives and your stakeholders before you need to call upon those people. So if the only time they're hearing from you is when it's bad news, it's going to be harder for you to convince them to get on board with your proposal. So really try to take a proactive approach to meeting the people in your organization whose help you're going to need and whose influence you're going to have to rely on to say, I want to spend this amount of money.
I'm just going to move along because I want to get to a couple more questions here. We're a little bit behind. One thing I would just add on to this for highlighting lessons learned for incidents, I think, the retail giant, which I won't name, which everyone knows, who had a breach about 10 years ago or so, I think the lessons learned from that particular breach impacted a lot of organizations and kind of woke a lot of organizations up with regard to third-party risk management, right? So I think some of the lessons learned were timely detection and response, because I think some of the issues were, it was hundreds and hundreds of days that the malware was on their systems, and then also communication and transparency with their customers and their stakeholders, right? So that was criticized and so forth. So I think, following breaches, it always seems that we get a lot of funding, we get a lot of money, but we want to try and be more proactive with that and make the cases to the senior leadership prior to it actually happening than after the case, because it's very easy to get the money after, right? So moving on, I think we'll jump to IoT security. So Internet of Things, so what security considerations are paramount, and how can vulnerabilities in IT devices be addressed?
So I think we already mentioned that Internet of Things, usually the last thing on their list is security. It's ease of use. When they're releasing Internet of Things, it's how easy can you use this, because we want everybody to use this. And security probably at best was a thought, but they don't care. It's somebody else's problem. All I'm doing is I'm getting it to where this fridge can talk to everybody else. And having that discussion with your CEO that it's not good to put the fridge on the network is an interesting discussion that I had. But explaining that there is no security in place, and this is a device, you don't know what's been programmed in it, you don't know who programmed it, and there is just nothing there security-wise. So if you're gonna do it, it shouldn't be on your main network, maybe your guest network if it's not connected in any way, shape, or form to anything else, but you have to put the security in place to offset what the Internet of Things manufacturer doesn't care about. And so that's just one of the things of you giving the business what they need in order for them to continue doing work. Because he looked at it as, isn't this cool that the fridge can say when we need more milk or whatever? And it's like, well, great. When are we ever going to need that? And second of all, what is the business reason for having that in place? And if there's not a business reason for having the Internet of Things, whatever that is in place, it shouldn't be there. So get top-down approval. Whoever says it has to be there, get it in writing of why, because you're probably going to have to go back to it at some point. And then document everything that you did to make it as secure as you possibly can, because it's all about documentation at that point. So if something happens that you get breached because of that Internet of Things, don't let yourself be the one flapping out in the wind. You have to have it documented. You have to have the chain of custody of who made the ultimate decision that you're going to use this, and they put it in writing so that you can refer back to that and said, here's the email thread that we went back and forth saying, I don't think it should be here. And this person said, well, you're going to do it. So that at least you're not the only scapegoat when something happens. So it's just, with Internet of Things, it is like anything else. It's another device that's getting into your environment, but you know that the Internet of Things is not built on security. So you have to be extra diligent to build in security any way you can, even if that security is a document saying it wasn't your idea and you did it because you were told to.
Yeah, and I would just add to, at a high level, for organizations, if you're a global organization, you need to have a governance program for IoT, right? Because if you're a global organization, you could have millions of IoT devices on your network, right? And if you don't know where they are or what they are, or you haven't broke them into categories like industry, consumer, medical devices, you're going to find yourself, in the news eventually, right? So I think that's paramount. The other paramount thing with Internet of Things is having a golden source of inventory, right? So you need to know what's on your network, and you need to have that in a source where you can run your normal processes, configuration management, vulnerability management, change management, all these different processes. These devices have to go through those similar processes, right? So I think that's key with Internet of Things. Let's see what else. So I think just knowing what you have and actually having a program to address it and a strategy of how you're going to handle it, because depending on your size, it could be overwhelming, right? So if anybody else has anything else to add to that one, I'm going to move on to. Let's see. Let's talk about security awareness. This seemed to be one that we had some thoughts on here. So what innovative approaches and technologies are being employed in security awareness training programs, and how effective are they in reducing human-related security risk?
So I think I'd like to take a different stance on it. So we talked earlier today about your training programs. They shouldn't be check the box, right? If the point of the training program is to just deliver content, you aren't going to see a very effective result. If the point of your delivery is to change the culture of your environment, to create a security-aware culture, then it's not necessarily what tool is the best to deliver the training. I think it's more how often are you subjecting the person to that training, and how often are you testing their knowledge on what they learned? So if it's something you give them once a year, they're probably working off to the side the whole time that the training was running. They can pass the test because we've all had to take this training every single year. But how often are they actually being asked to think, to make decisions, whether you're doing phishing simulations? Do they know how to report properly? Do they get any kind of feedback after they report? Yes, that was an actual phishing attempt or not. And I think monitoring and reporting is really important too. So if a person does fail a phishing test, who gets that report? How is it handled? What kind of communication is given to that person? What support do they need? So I think it's less about the tools and more about your objectives and your training testing.
And just to kind of follow up with that, everyone needs security awareness training, and things change so often that you also want to make sure that you're updating your training, right? So one thing that I always look at is what was the version, what was the content. Every test or every training opportunity we have should be fresh, should never be outdated. It should not be something that someone has seen multiple times. Also, people learn differently each and every time. So a variety of different training styles, if you have a security awareness program, should leverage all opportunities and tools that you have. Videos, quizzes, we do a newsletter, just any opportunity you have to get in front of someone and express to them emerging threats and techniques and remind them of their responsibilities, the better off that security program will be.
And you bring up a good point. Something we were talking about earlier is the type of phishing attempts that a CEO or a higher level person gets are going to be a little bit different than somebody that's like maybe the first or second year into their career. So that type of training may need to be tailored for the different levels as well.
And I know this is Ron's favorite subject. You have nothing to say.
Oh, I have plenty to say, but like I said, I'm keeping my mouth closed. I'll let you guys talk what time does the lights go off? It is all about that training. The other thing that I would say is ramifications. So what happens if you fail it? How do I help that person understand not just that they failed, but why they failed, how to avoid failing it again, and then any consequences that you have should also be from the top down. If you have something in place that says you failed 3 times and you're fired, does that apply to the CEO? And if it doesn't, it's not a policy. Because, well, because just saying they're exempt because they're CEO isn't a business justification. So what you're saying is that the CEO is okay not to understand why he's failed 3 times, but this low-level person in accounting isn't? So, I'm not saying that that's going to be something that's going to really easily be able to bridge the gap on, but that's what you should be fighting for and asking those types of questions. So when somebody comes up and says 3 times and you're out, does it apply to everyone? If not, then what's the business justification for it applying to everybody but this people or these group of people?
And I think, you're absolutely right, because that's a stick approach, right? What about a carrot approach? One thing that I've seen that seems to be very helpful is when teams utilize a channel to share with each other. To say, I identified this phishing attack, and here's the markers that I noticed, and they share that with their team, and then the rest of the team celebrates that person and says, oh, good eye, or that was tricky. Yeah, I would have fell for that one. So how are you rewarding the good behavior, not just pointing out what was wrong is important.
And I'll say rewards, people like rewards. They do. I mean, we introduced a phishing application, I won't be name specific, that actually sent out phishing email tests. And I told the people when it got released, if there is nobody that falls for a phishing scam within the next 30 days, I will throw a pizza party for the entire company. Can anybody guess whether or not I brought in pizza for everyone? I did. Because the carrot was big enough that they listened to what they should not be looked at, and they questioned everything. Now, I will tell you that I got so many emails of, is this legit, is this legit? Because they were afraid to fail. But I'm happy with that, because at least I got them thinking whether it's legit or not. So for me, it was a pure win, and I had the CEO's buy-in. Use the company credit card, bring in pizza for everyone, because it was a celebration that training actually stuck. And we showed that, I would tell you, in 30 days, I did 3 different phishing attempts to the entire company. It wasn't a one and done. And 3 phishing attempts, 0 people clicked on it. So it's possible, but that reward has to make it to where people actually think about it. It's more than just security wants this. It's, look, I can get a free lunch if I think before clicking on anything. And it's amazing how that type of reward works.
So,
that works for me too. Don't ruin it for anybody else, because I wouldn't have said we didn't get this because Ron was the one that clicked on something, because I would never do anything like that. But I'm sure there is an aspect of you don't want to fail the rest of the team too. But make the reward worth it. I'm going to give you an extra penny. Everybody's going to go, great, I found one on the street. Granted, pizza's not that expensive and we can get it, but for whatever reason, food talks. So just find that reward.
Ron, I thought you were going to say you flew in the pizza from someplace. It's a special pizza.
No, I didn't drive.
Oh, okay. All right. Just a couple of... Oh, we had a question. Yes, right here.
As an employee, I'm tired of pizza parties. There's other foods we can use for rewards. But when there's like, there goes a reward, I'm like, here comes the pizza party, and it's pizza. Yeah. There's other food. Well, I'm joking. How do we get away from, or if this is a checkbox exercise, which we've all been there, how do we change the culture of that? Because perfect example, I went through a previous employer, we got a pen test, and I'm like drilling trying to get these results, and all of a sudden 3 things got fixed during the remediation period. I'm like, why do we spend $30,000 for this? Oh, it's a checkbox. And I'm like, and this is coming from my boss. Like, so how do we change the culture from just doing this as a checkbox to actually doing this for a purpose?
I was just going to say, for me, it's using real life examples. So the vast number of failed phishing attempts that have resulted in massive amounts of financial loss, sending that individual an article showing X amount of dollars lost because somebody's email got compromised is especially motivating for sharing how important security awareness training and phishing training is, right?
Send that same email to the CFO. I guarantee you get his buy-in. Find the right person. It doesn't have to be your boss that is the hero at the executive level. Find the right executive and build that bridge with them.
I'm going to just add a couple of quick things for innovative technologies or approaches that some organizations are looking at. Interactive, gamified content, micro-learning modules. We talked about phishing, and then virtual reality, augmented reality, and mobile learning platforms for folks so that they can learn anywhere. Serious games. So that's just a laundry list there of items that, if you do some research in that area, you've got to make it so that it's interactive for the folks and that it's specific to their role as well, if you can, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. We're running out of time here, but I did want to cover one more topic that we thought was important here, was collaboration and information sharing. So how can industry collaboration and information sharing enhance collective security defenses?
I can share a good opportunity that we had with CISA. So the Cyber and Security and Infrastructure Security Agency offered some really great pilot programs a couple years ago in which we could take advantage of some of their service offerings for critical infrastructure providers, and they were 100% free. They came on site, they met with our IT team, they met with our security engineers, and it was an entire day of knowledge transfer and sharing, and it was mind-blowing. The changes that were made just from a cultural perspective, in knowing that there are others out there struggling with the exact same situation that we all do, right, in our day-to-day, and to have resources that have seen it across the board and share lessons learned and provide recommendations and give examples of where the biggest gaps and risks are and whether or not you're meeting the guidelines in industry for that has been very, very successful for us, and it's something that we will continue to do. Another thing that tends to be a check-the-box function in the financial sphere is our information sharing site. So FSISAC in the financial realm, another tool you can do for free, or you can pay for their subscription model. But we have brought it down to even just our frontline engineers to leverage their threat intel lines, to get involved in some of the leadership opportunities, the summits, things like that. Coming back from those opportunities has been really great in terms of energizing individuals who maybe on a day-to-day basis get kind of stuck in the grind. But again, collaborating with others in your industry, even conferences like this, I think are really helpful for moving the needle for InfoSec practices.
Yeah, networking. Meet people. I mean, how many conferences do we see each other at? Multiple, and then we're part of the same SIM Tampa. It's a group, it's an organization of security people that meet. Build your network. LinkedIn, reach out to other people. Send me a LinkedIn invite, I will accept it. If you want to learn security and you want to be more secure, increase your network. So that if something happens, your network says, hey, have you guys heard about this? There are many of LinkedIn chats that are free that you can join, that's all they do is they talk about vulnerabilities that have come out and how did you help solve them so that you're not alone. Even if you're the only person in your company that's doing security, you're not alone. There are free solutions, there are paid solutions, but there are solutions that allow you to stay connected to people, allow you that I don't have the answer, but I can reach out to my network and somebody in my network should have the answer and help each other out. You know, it is not a dog eat dog. We're all in this together. If security is bad, security is bad. It looks bad on everyone in security. So we need to help each other. We need to be support groups for each other because we never know when we're going to be the one that needs that support. And it comes back in spades, let me tell you. Just network, reach out.
You know, one note on networking, I think it's also helpful to try to network with groups adjacent to. So as an example, I'm in one group that is a bunch of accountants, another one which is a bunch of CISOs, a third which is IT auditors, and then another which is regular auditors. Then I come to conferences like this, right? So you get to meet a lot of different people that will look at a topic from completely different perspectives, and that really helps too when you're thinking about something.
All right. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll open it up to just any questions that the audience may have out here. Well, okay. All right. Well, we still got a couple minutes, so I think we can just quickly maybe touch on ethical hacking and pen testing. So the question that we had was, how critical is ethical hacking and pen testing in identifying and fixing security vulnerabilities?
So I think it's a really important tool for your toolbox, and I will caveat with make sure that the organization that you're using to do the pen test actually has the skills and requisite expertise, as that pen test is only going to be as good as what it finds and if it's actionable data. So ultimately, again, it comes back to you don't want to just check the box.
The other thing with pen testing too is scope. So if you're just doing the check the box, then you're not getting a full picture into where your actual risks are. And again, that is not really worth the paper that that pen test is written on. The other thing is do something with the results of that pen test. Extremely frustrating to see the same findings year after year after year and ask yourself, why did we spend this money? What did we do it for? So I think follow through on pen test results is also important. So making sure that the scope is where it needs to be from a risk and criticality perspective, and that whatever comes out of that report should be addressable or have some sort of note as to why we're not taking action, and that should be well documented.
I think it's also helpful to rotate the firm that you use to do the pen test. Don't use the same one year after year after year again. Get a fresh perspective.
Okay. Any questions on that? That's it? Okay. So we are wrapping up, and thanks to the panelists. Phenomenal coverage there.
I just want to thank you guys because literally they could be doing anything else today and they chose to be here, and so we really, really appreciate them. So if you don't mind, give them another round of applause. And also, before we get started with prizes, a thank you to our sponsors because, again, without them, we would not be here, and neither would all these prizes I'm getting ready to give away. So you guys go have a drink, have a cocktail. Thank you for your time so much. I appreciate it. And we're getting ready to give some prizes away.